right. Welcome to the episode, Jacob. Super excited to have you on. So, we will be diving into what we call boiler room insights. So, lately we have been chatting with a bunch of revenue pros, and it's been fascinating to see how AI is changing pipeline strategies. So, we have got some great topics ahead on AI in B2B pipeline generation. Before we jump in, do you want to tell us a bit about your current role?
Sure. Yeah, I work in software. I work for a company called Muckrack. It sells a PR software that essentially optimizes media relations workflows. And in my current role as the team lead, I not only have an individual pipeline responsibility of booking
Okay.
meetings and making sure they hold and they're qualified, but also being a leader on the team and contributing to more internal projects as well.
That's great. All right. So let's jump on to the topics. The first question I would like to ask you is, what are the three AI use cases you have seen improve B2B pipeline generation?
Yeah, I think AI is extremely interesting in pipeline generation.
Yeah.
Here's the first reason, right? You can pull in local news very easily. Especially people love to underplay small talk, talking about the weather, but I think it's really important to know what's happening in your prospect city. Use it as an icebreaker. Even prepare company specific news updates, right? You can get real-time insights on funding rounds, on executive hires, on press coverage, right? So the first use case of AI is really cutting down on surfing Google for links, right? You can use AI to have a very streamlined query, get everything you need for that local news to make sure you're informed. And then secondly, this is might be a controversial one, but summarizing social activity. There's AI that can scan a prospect's recent LinkedIn posts and suggest relevant talking points.
Yeah.
And we're finding that this is interesting because sometimes a lot of company level personalization seems a little bit superficial. We say, "Hey, I saw you recently acquired X company." It doesn't feel like super targeted, super personalized, but I can say, "Hey, I saw your post about how AI is revolutionizing pipeline generation. I have a really cool insight on that and how Muckrack might fit in, right?" And having that prospect level personalization is important. And then lastly, I would say script optimization. And we're going to dive a little bit farther into this in terms of how I use AI for content, but I really enjoy having AI analyze my script and not only do, improvements for typos, but also a little bit deeper level, right? Is this persuasive? Do you think this flow is clear? Hey, if I was applying to be a Harvard literary professional, do you think this would help me get into Harvard, right? You can get creative with these prompts and really optimize your script and make it digestible, right? You don't want to really confuse your prospect because it's so complex, but you also don't want it to sound like you're not professional.
Yeah. That's really insightful.
Thank you.
So let's jump on to our next question. The next question would be, how does AI effectively help in identifying high intent leads?
So I think when I heard your question, right, I honed in on intent, right? And sometimes when we're talking about intent, we have to get super granular with the persona that we're reaching
Right.
out to. So firstly, I would use AI for contact mapping and market research, right? So you might use Apollo or Clay for this to segment your prospects, filter by geography, company size, tech stack, or enriching your contact lists. At the end of the day, for example, if I'm making a list of people who I want to dial, we have a very vast contact database list. But if I can even identify country codes, okay, I want to reach out to people in Brazil. That country code is plus 55. People in the UK, that country code is plus 44, right? We can use AI to really hone in on segmenting who we want to reach out to. And that way we can develop certain scripts to be able to actually speak to the global use cases of whatever product we're selling. So in terms of high intent leads, the first thing is going to be geography, right? Using AI to segment how are we going to get in contact with these people depending on their market? Secondly, it's going to be looking at triggers, right? So you can use AI for to help brainstorm. Some people don't have the same level of enablement that other folks have in terms of Salesforce and Slack backend triggers to give you marketing qualified leads or whatever the case may be. If you don't have that, maybe use AI to help you brainstorm and say, hey, what are some good triggers that might mean that a lead is ready to buy? Okay, one of them might be they're following your company on LinkedIn. Another might
Yeah.
be they're directly in your market, the title is correct, and they just changed jobs within 90 days. Studies show that if a prospect has changed jobs in their first 90 days, they're more likely to make a more impactful decision because they're trying to switch
Yes,
things up, right? So you
absolutely.
want to combine these targets, right? You want to combine the title, combine the geography, combine certain triggers, someone following you on LinkedIn or LinkedIn activity. Maybe a prospect posted, "Hey, I really want a PR database in Muckrak's example, right? So you can actually search LinkedIn activity and you can do what's called a Boolean search, right? A Boolean search, you want to really put whatever you're looking for in quotes, brackets. You can do an exact match. And once you can search the whole database of LinkedIn posts for people who might fit the the type of prospect that you're looking to reach out to.
That's really powerful. Step by step, how AI can be utilized. Great. Let's jump on to the next question. Can you please share an example of how AI powered personalization boosting conversion rates?
I actually have a good example with shout out to Lavender AI. First of
Oh,
all, I love tools that have free functions, right, to show that value for whenever you want to invest in the paid one. But Lavender AI, it'll help you with subject lines, with how long your email is. It'll give you a score, right? It'll say, look, right now this email is a 50 out of 100, right? And here's how you can punch it up. This line is too long. The structure is a little bit bulky. You're using a lot of words that aren't accessible, right? The prospect needs to be able to understand what you're saying. So I think that's a really good example because, for example, I just used Lavender. I maybe had a very long email, and everyone knows this when you're objection managing. It's easy to try to get a little wordy because you're trying to convince the prospect, like, hey,
right.
please, you're making a mistake by trying not to see the platform. But I used Lavender and it told me, hey, make it a little bit more high level, right? Let's shorten it up. Let's be a human, right? You don't have to convince too hard. And I was actually able to book the meeting off of that objection management strategy of making it a little bit simpler, not trying to word dump or product feature dump or anything like that. But more broadly, email scoring and performance enhancement is extremely crucial because not only does it grade the emails on readability, suggest improvements for personalization, but it can actually predict response likelihood on similar emails because how AI works, right? It's a database of queries, data, improvements, feedback, right? And it's learning as it goes. So for these, I'll recommend Drift Email. Drift Email is really good. Lavender
Right.
AI, as I mentioned. The main thing what we want to do here is to really leverage our external resources, right? Yeah, I might think I'm smart. I might think I'm good at my job. But at the end of the day, if I'm the only person providing feedback to my outreach, I'm going to be biased. I'm going to be flawed, right? So I appreciate that AI is developing in a way to where it can give you feedback, score it, and then help you personalize at a higher level.
This is very informative, like specific tools. So the next question is what common pitfalls should teams avoid when using AI in pipeline generation?
I think I'll be remiss to not touch on the most important one, which is sharing sensitive company info and data. I think a lot of times we want to be as specific as possible when querying AI. We want to give AI all of the context as if it's a friend or anything like that. But one problem we're running into is compliance, legal issues, right? You shouldn't have a top security clearance and be sharing things that are data security risks. So AI models, they process input, but they don't have built-in security measures to protect classified and sensitive information. So even if OpenAI doesn't store conversations, any data outside of secured government systems is at a risk, right? So we want to make sure that we're being compliant. You're compliant with regulations like GDPR, ITAR, HIPAA, CMMC, right? So there's no confidentiality guarantees with AI models, right? If you say something really sensitive, there's no guarantee that AI is going to keep that secret for you. And then lastly, with this on this note, there's a lack of context with AI. So AI responses, they're based on patterns and not verification. So if sensitive data is shared, let's say, as an example, I have a really sensitive topic that has to do with national security. And I'm sharing a lot of context with AI to give me a recommendation on what to do. Since AI has so much missing context on this matter, it can lead me down the wrong path and generate a misleading or inaccurate or inappropriate recommendation because it doesn't have the true full context of this topic. And then that might lead you to making a bad decision or getting fired or whatever the case may be. So the first thing is sharing sensitive company info and data. You want to keep things very general. Lastly, in terms of B2B pipeline generation, I'll get really granular. We actually touched a little bit upon this, is using it for refinement and not creation. A lot of times we'll say, hey, write this email for me and then I'll edit it. What I really enjoy about humans in general, we're creative. And while we're typing an email, we can put ourselves in the prospect shoes and say, what will I say to get them to respond? I
Mm-hmm.
recommend writing out an email, cool, copy it, paste it into whatever AI you use. Could be ChatGPT, but that's not the only one. You might use Jasper AI, right? You might
Yeah.
use Hemingway Editor. Copy and paste it in and say, hey, I want to punch this up. Can you make this more authoritative, right? I'm talking to a VP. I'm talking to a VP and I have to sound a little bit more professional, a little bit more high level. Hey, I'm talking to more of an end user, a coordinator or specialist. I need this to sound more casual, right? So use it for refinement and not creation. I think those are the top two pitfalls I'm seeing.
Practical insights. Let's move on to the last question. So, what your favorite new tools for B2B pipeline generation in 2025?
2025, what I'm appreciating about AI, there's so many new updates and so many new apps coming out. First one I would recommend has to be Gong. Not only does it provide that database and library of calls, but the AI portion, right? We're analyzing those calls in real time. We're giving feedback on tonality, right? It's giving you stats saying, hey, look, in a lot of calls, the rep is talking 70% of the time. Let's try to cut that down to 55%. We're seeing data that says 55% is the better number, right? It's giving you a talk
Right.
to listen ratio. It's giving you objection handling tips. So I appreciate Gong for really analyzing that. There's also AI for being able to cold call role play, which is called second nature AI. So a lot of times people might feel afraid to ping people and say, hey, can you role play with me? As an AI powered role play partner, it can help SDRs to really refine their pitch before making real calls. And that's useful because a lot of times when I'm mentoring new reps, there's all these things floating around in their head. It's like, oh, what if they say this and this doesn't sound that good? And at oh my God, end of the day, they get really scared and actually just pressing the dial button. And a lot of times execution should be over trying to be perfect. And then lastly, I would say Owler. So Owler, it delivers real-time company alerts for funding rounds, executive hires, industry news, and it really makes it easy to personalize outreach because you have a curated feed and really information source to say, hey, I need really hyper personalization, but just in the palm of my hand, and I don't want to take too long to research. And that's really useful for what we talked about earlier in the conversation, which is, hey, I don't want to waste time, but I do want to make sure this is relevant to the prospect that I'm reaching out to. I would say those are my favorite tools thus far.
That's very powerful insight and useful, like specific tools that you shared. Thanks, Jacob.
All
Yes.
right, sounds
And
good. Thank you for
I'm
your help.
sure Rev community gonna love these insights.
I appreciate
Thank
that, and
you.
I appreciate you. Have a good one.